Morning, everybody, and on behalf of the Henley Coaching Partnership, a very warm welcome to our webinar this morning. So this is actually a series of webinars called the Mastery Series. There's 6 of them, and the idea of this is that if you master these 6 areas of business, you're going to have an amazing business. So those are marketing mastery that we did last week, sales mastery we're going to do today, team mastery we're going to do on the 12th of February, so book yourself in for that. Then we're going to do self-mastery, customer mastery, and financial mastery. So those are all of the key parts of the mastery series. Now, these are 3 months coaching blocks, and the idea of these webinars is just to give you the essence of each one of those subjects. So today we're going to be talking about the essence of sales. That's what today is all about, sales. So if marketing is attracting leads into your business, sales is converting them into real customers that pay us money. So that's the essence of sales. So first of all, I'd like to welcome the other 2 coaches from the Henley Coaching Partnership. Chris, who's doing a fantastic job of managing the room. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, David, and good morning, everybody. Thank you.
And Joe Bentley. Good morning, Joe.
Morning, everyone.
And we're also super lucky today to have a special guest with James Newell. James, good morning and welcome to the Henley Coaching Partnership this morning.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me back.
So as I said, we're going to be talking today about sales. Now, we talked last week or a couple of weeks ago about marketing. So that's the idea of attracting leads into the business. But it's no good attracting leads into the business if we can't convert them into paying customers. And that I've always found is a special art. And some business owners kind of are natural at it and are great salespeople, and some people take a bit of getting used to the art of sales. So that's why we're going to be covering sales today. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to James and talk to you about sales mastery. James, they're all yours.
Thank you very much. Right, I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully I won't cut everybody off, so we'll see how that goes. Perfect. Everybody can see that, I presume. So yeah, good morning, everybody. First thing before we get into it, I'll ask you to pop your questions in the chat as we go. I'll try and make this as interactive as possible. I've only got kind of 45 minutes to an hour with you, and I've got an awful lot of content that I want to cover. But for me, the main thing, whenever I speak anywhere for however long, I'm always really aware of giving you as much value as possible, making this a really, really good use of your time. So after this, we'll share with you all of the slides for everything that we cover, as well as some links to some additional free learnings and videos and things that will help you to progress things a little bit further if you choose to do so. So any questions, just pop them in the chat as we go. So I'll tell you who I am first of all, but we'll get the introduction out the way so we can get straight to actually teach you some good stuff. So this is me. My name is James Newell. My company is Clear Sales Message. And I'm called that because in those 3 words, you should be able to take a guess at what you think I do, and you should be absolutely right, or at least in the ballpark. I essentially teach people how to sell, and for me, it comes in 2 distinct components that combine together. The first one is clarity, which is the clear sales message piece, clarity of message. As flippant as it might sound, you've got to be able to clearly and articulately and commercially be able to explain to people what you actually offer and how you differentiate in the marketplace and why they might wish to choose you and what they get for the money, and all those basic kind of buyer questions. The second part of selling for me is what I call selling confidence. So this is the behavioral side of things, which is what David was alluding to there earlier. Asking for the business, talking about price, handling objections. I think it's fair to say most people have a bit of a resistance to selling. They fear, hate, or avoid it. And one of my specialities is actually helping people overcome that and teaching them how to sell in a really natural way. So my overarching methodology is clarity of message plus confidence of delivery equals conversion. Nice and simple. What we're going to cover today, 3 distinct things. The first thing is mindset. So obviously it's a cavalier assumption there that I'm assuming you don't like selling, but why you don't like selling. The second one is process. So some important factors. And there's one thing in particular that lots of people miss in terms of the structural mechanics of how we sell and how we deal with people. And then finally, tools. So I've got 2 tools I'm going to share with you that will be really useful. One of them is how you commercialize a conversation. So if you've ever been in a conversation and you thought, we've essentially become friends now. How do I commercialize this? How do I bring this back to talking about business? I've got that for you. And I've got a second tool which helps you deal with objections to understand what's a real objection, what's a false objection. So we'll start with mindset. The first thing that we're going to cover here is why you might not like selling. And like I said, I'm making a cavalier assumption that you don't, but I think it's fair to say that most people have a degree of reticence when it comes to selling. And there's a couple of good reasons for that. So the first reason is this: most people think that selling is actually bad. It's a negative thing. And all you've got to do is run a Google image search to see the kind of imagery that comes up. And it's not really positive, right? Nobody really looks at that and thinks, yep, I aspire to be this. This is what I want to be. I really resonate with this imagery. And interestingly enough, for your own industry, your own business, if you run a Google image search for whatever your profession is and whatever you do, have a look at the images that come up, because this is essentially the collective consciousness of how we view you and what you do. So there's basically no positive role models when it comes to selling. That's the first reason. The second thing is we've been told to believe that there should be some immediate payoff. So if this is a sales call now, either I've got to close you or you're going to close me. It's very heated. It's very macho. It's very zero-sum game. Somebody's going to win. Somebody's going to lose. So we're generally encouraged to work to our timelines. Well, I need to make money from David right now, so I'm just going to push him to sell to him right now. I don't really care what he needs. It's all about me. And the problem is this. On the bottom rung there, it's if we lead with impatience, it leads us to be pushy, and that can lead us to lose the sale because nobody likes to be pushed. If we actually lead with serving, and I know the term serving can sometimes be overused a little bit, but if we lead with serving and genuinely helping people and adding value first and foremost, that leads to reciprocity and you're far more likely to make the sale. One of the things that I say to my clients and students, definitely from a pushiness point of view, is if you don't like it as a buyer, then don't do it as a seller. So if you don't like people pushing you and following you up endlessly and not really getting the message, then don't repeat that behavior when you're on the other side of the table as the seller, because you'll essentially push people away. That's what happens. The third reason that you probably don't like selling is you probably don't think that you're actually any good at it. And this is a really, really common one. And we tend to internalize things. So when we fail at something, we tend to think, well, I'm a failure at that. And then we don't really want to repeat it. We tend to avoid things that we're not good at. But how could you be any good? Because you've probably never really been taught or shown step by step how to do it. Or if you have, might be some of the old school, just do whatever you need to get the deal kind of approach, which I don't think it ever really worked, to be honest, but it seems to be the standard that lots of people adhere to. I used this slide last time I spoke at the Henley Partnership. So if I told you today, right, I need you to make this cake for me, here are all of the ingredients, here's everything that you need, but I'm not going to tell you in which order that you need to do things or how to do things, which is essentially what we're doing with selling, then this is going to be the end result. You're not going to be perfect first time unless you have a structure and a process to follow. There's always room for improvement. But the problem with selling is we have such an emotional attachment to money, and this zero-sum game of I'm winning and you're losing, all this kind of stuff becomes very heated, and then we just try to avoid it. Like I say, we just avoid things that we're not good at. Fourth reason why you probably don't like selling is along the same lines. You've never really been taught. So if you've not been taught, you've got two options here. You can either replicate the behavior that you've already seen, which is these kind of people, and you're being something you're not in that case. So David, you're probably wondering what I charge. Let me tell you, we kind of put on this macho kind of character that we feel we have to be because that's what we've seen in real life and in TV. So surely this is how it's done. Or you go the other end of the spectrum, and we talk to people like we would normally, and you get friend zoned. And I don't know if this has ever happened to you guys when you're talking to somebody and you think, oh my God, how could we ever talk about money and business ever again? We're essentially best friends now. We've gone completely uncommercial. So you either replicate the behavior you've seen and you're kind of overly aggressive, or you get friend zoned ultimately because you're too friendly. And in both ends of that spectrum, you're going to lack confidence. And confidence is very important when it comes to selling, because that's what your buyers are actually looking for when they're speaking with you. They're looking for confidence, certainty, and expertise. By definition, you're an expert at what you do, or at least you should be. By definition, you're certain you can get the end result that you claim to be able to get for me, but whether or not you can deliver that confidently is everything. And if you've ever been in a situation when you've been talking with somebody and you've come to the conclusion that everything sounded okay, just didn't feel right, then that's exactly what this is about. So most people are really good at what they do, but they're not actually good at selling it. And as a buyer, we make this causal correlation, even though it's false, that if David can't explain, sorry, I keep picking you, David. If David can't explain to me clearly what he does in coaching and why it's important, if he can't articulate that, for me, that kind of implies that his skill level at that is equally as poor. That's not actually the case, but we draw that causal link. So confidence is really important in the selling environment. And the final reason that you might fear, hate, or avoid selling is this, and this is why we feel pushy when we sell. So we have this natural aversion to always put ourselves first. We can't help it. So if we took a group photo, I always use this example, if we took a group photo, but being on Zoom, we're in kind of a Brady Bunch box collection of people. Most of the time you're looking at yourself. Or if you look at a school photo, you look at a picture of yourself. And it happens all the time. So when I first created this slide about 18 months ago, I thought, hang on a minute, that's me in the middle. So we even see things that look like us. We're always attuned to us and our needs. And we put ourselves first. It's just a pure survival instinct. There's not much we can do about it. But in a selling situation, it's very difficult because none of the, and you've probably seen this image before, none of these people are wrong. It's neither a 6 nor a 9. But if the chap that's talking about 9 is the person buying, we have to adopt their viewpoint and talk to them about that. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. And this is where we get this natural aversion, this natural inclination, to talk about features and technicals and details rather than what our buyers actually care about. So we talk to them about the things that we're excited about. We feel that they're not really resonating and we feel pushy, but we don't know what to do about it. So I've got a couple of simple mechanisms for you to use to be more confident when you sell. They're very easy to remember and very simple to implement. The first one is this: don't chase them, replace them. We're often told in a selling environment, it comes from like a scarcity mindset. We're told things like this: do whatever you need to do to get the sale. Just do the deal, get the sale, get them through the door. Either you're going to close them or they're going to close you. We come from this real place of scarcity. Just push for the sale, James. You'll be absolutely fine. But as we know, coming back to this notion of being the buyer and being the seller, if you push people, you're probably going to push them away, because if you were the buyer, you'd be pushed away too. So my advice here is, when you feel like you have to follow somebody up for the umpteenth time, even though they've not really got back to you, take that energy and put that into finding more potential clients, more opportunities. There's no point chasing people that have not really come back to you, because you're just going to push them away and perhaps they're not interested, and that's okay. So don't chase them, replace them. And the example that I always use here is prospecting, because that's what we're talking about here, prospecting, which comes from gold prospecting. You take a lump of soil, dirt, sand, you put it into the tray, add the water, shake it, take out the gold, throw out the stones, repeat the process. When we endlessly follow people up, even though they don't come back to us ever, and we feel like we have to just hit that magic number of 47 follow-ups and then they're going to buy from us, we're essentially just shaking the pan endlessly, waiting for the gold to appear, even though there's no gold there. So don't chase them, replace them. It gives you more options and there's less pressure, and pressure repels buy, so it's better for everybody. So the first thing is, don't chase them, replace them. And the second thing, which is a reciprocity kind of approach, and this is my natural approach to life anyway, sales or otherwise, I call it always leading with the value. So you always want to leave people better than when you found them. So in every phone call you have, or email, or interaction, or whatever, if it's a sales one, we generally feel like we're taking from people, oh, you haven't got 5 minutes, have you, David? I just need to, oh, sorry to interrupt you. We feel like we're imposing and we're taking. So flip that on its head. Hi, David. Actually, I really want to share this with you. It's a really great article, idea, tip, opinion, structure, whatever. What can you bring to your clients, potential clients, that's of value? That's not really going to cost you anything to share it, but it's going to be beneficial for them. Because if we do that, we lose this kind of master-servant feeling that we have, and we incite the law of reciprocity. So people are far more likely to respond to us and be friendly with us if we do something for them in the first place. So the main advice really is to focus on your client's needs above all else. And that will help you to get away from this notion of, oh, I'm interrupting David, I'm taking from him. I'm actually calling you to share something really exciting with you, and then we can talk about things after that. Okay, I'm going to stop for a bit of breath here, David. That's mindset for you. Any questions?
Yeah, I mean, fantastic. That was great. I mean, I'm exhausted listening to you, but it's.
I was going to say, I usually caveat, because we've only got the hour or 45 minutes really, I usually caveat my presentations with, I move extremely quickly. And there's a reason why I do that. It's to do with sort of capturing people's attention. But yeah, I do move extremely quickly.
Hey, look, there's a couple of areas I'd like to explore around this notion of confidence. Yeah, because confidence is I found critical in selling, as you highlighted. And one of the areas I think people struggle with is dealing with no. People don't like being refused, but of course, no is the right answer in many cases in the sales process. Of course, if you go through the sales process trying to avoid the dreaded no, then sometimes you can't find the confidence to get the yes. So, how do you teach people, not to worry about the no?
I did a LinkedIn article on this last year, actually, and the title of it was "Not Everybody's Going to Buy from You, and That's Okay." So this kind of comes back to this notion of, well, if I fail to sell something to you today, David, then I've failed. I've done something wrong here. But maybe you were never the right buyer. It was never the right time. So for me, this is where the notion of don't chase them, replace them comes in. So that removes some of this pressure. And also, whenever I'm talking to anybody in a sales context, I'm only trying to do two distinct things. I need to give you the information that you need and the opportunity that you need to make the best decision for yourself. Even if the best decision is to not buy from me, that's absolutely fine. But I need to make sure you know exactly what I'm offering you. And I've got to remember to actually ask you for the business and commercialize it in some way and not get friend zoned. But you've always got to make the best decision for yourself, because the alternative to that is I try and push you into buying something, and yes, you buy it and I get your money, but you resent me, you might say bad things about me, and there's reputational damage. Nobody really wins. So no's are absolutely fine. We just temper that with don't chase them, replace them. There's lots more people for you to speak to. The reason no is such an issue is because you're looking at your pipeline of a finite number of people and think, oh my God, if I get 3 or 4 more no's, my pipeline's completely destroyed. Just find more people. Don't chase them, replace them. That's my advice for that.
Fantastic. The other area I think around confidence, which I think is really important, is sometimes there's this little thing going through your head that says, well, actually, can I really deliver this product or service? So it's kind of the self-doubt bit. Obviously, in most of communication is body language. So if that's going through your head, sometimes you don't display the confidence to sell. Now, I don't particularly like the expression fake it till you make it, but how do you build that sort of body language confidence around something that maybe you haven't delivered a lot before and it's a new product or something like that, but clearly you've got to display that confidence in order to get the deal?
Well, there's 2 things we can do. If you have already delivered it, one thing you can do, which very few people do, is collect reviews, case studies, testimonials. Social proof is kind of the posh term for that. If you collect that, that will help you not only demonstrate to people that you know what you're talking about, but also in your quieter moments, you can read through it and remind yourself, say, yeah, actually, I'm good at what I do. And because we're all too bloody British and we're too polite and we don't actually sort of understand where we are skilled and we have ability in certain places. But if you've never done it before, one thing that you can do is articulate your process of working. How do you do what you do? Now, you don't need to give away your secret sauce and give me anything that's IP, intellectual property, anything like that. But if you could say, David, my overarching methodology is clarity of message, confidence of delivery. And from talking to you, I think it's actually the messaging that might be the issue here. Would I be correct? Okay, blah, blah, blah. It allows me to structure the conversation. And that's where the confidence comes from, having that structure. So if you don't already have it, have a way to articulate how you do what you do, a step-by-step process, a Venn diagram, however it's going to be, just some high-level elements that are important. And then you can really supercharge that by just giving it a name. So if it has a name, it has implied value. But if you've never done something before, having your process of working to articulate, that will really help you feel more confident in the conversation, because you also know what to talk about and how to structure that conversation.
That's really useful. Fantastic. James, I'm going to let you carry on.
I'll take a deep breath and start again.
Have a drink.
I was just going to say, after this, as well as the links to these slides, I'll dig out a couple of those LinkedIn articles as well that are relevant to the questions that you've just asked me, because it goes into a little bit more detail about how to create a process at work and all that kind of stuff.
James, just one of the messages that have come in the chat box, I think it's probably quite apt, is because you mentioned it, is how do we get out of the friend zone? So from Hillary, so how do we get out of the friend zone, which I'm sure most people want to hear but don't want to ask the question, so well done on Hillary.
Yeah, well done. Yeah, and it's funny, it takes a lot of courage to ask those kind of questions, so well done. At the end of this presentation, I've got a solution for you. It's called the value loop. So I've got a mechanism that you can use to do that, so we will cover that in this presentation.
Right.
Let's start again. Okay, so process. So these are some of the mechanicals, and I can't go into too much detail with the time that I've got, but just some of the mechanicals to be aware of in terms of setting yourself up for success when it comes to selling. So this is one of the first things that I always talk about with people, and this is how we overcome the notion of talking about the things that matter to us and boring people and sort of being overbearing on them. You have to remember that nobody's buying what you're selling. What they're actually buying is the end result or the thereafter. And often that's actually a feeling or an emotion, or it's a contextual situation. So once you can understand what that is, and you can focus your communication on that and theme that accordingly, that's how you really connect with people. So I use airline adverts as the example. Airline adverts, you very rarely see a plane or a plane seat in them. You'll see a destination, a beach, an Eiffel Tower, Christmas markets, all that kind of stuff. The airlines know you don't actually want an economy class seat to Paris, but you do want to take your significant other for a romantic weekend away. So what's the destination in your business? How do you leave people better than when you found them? And try and focus on that. It's a very simple concept, but something that's very easy to get wrong. And if you look at your own websites today and your own sales collateral, just pay attention. Are you actually selling that end result and the benefits, or are you focusing too much on the technicals and the details of how we actually get you to that destination? The second thing is trigger points. So lots of us understand our avatar, our ideal client type is this person, this business, this set of characteristics, but when do they need you? So a simplified example of a trigger point would be a leaky tap is a trigger point to have a plumber. So what's the trigger point for needing your offering? It might not be that obvious, but there will be things there. So look at the people that you're dealing with and you have dealt with, and look for those patterns and clues. And if you're friendly with your clients, phone them and ask them. And just once you can find out what triggered them to need you and what caused them to act, you can then use that information to find more people experiencing the exact same trigger point. And once you do that, you're speaking to the right people at the right time, and that will massively increase your chances of success and get away from this issue of sort of too many no's. So what's the trigger point that causes somebody to need you? Now, this was inspired by my deodorant in my bathroom, which is awesome. The defined problem effect. Sometimes you have to state the bloody obvious, to be frank. So what are the problems you actually solve? And let's list them out. So for this particular thing, it's burning, dryness, itchiness, blah, 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 etc. What are the specific pain points, the specific problems and things that you solve? Are you being clear about them in your communication? And could you reel them off to me in a concise way? The secret, if it's not really a secret, but the secret to being confident when you sell is to be prepared and have all this stuff ready. So if you know that you deal with a certain number of things, and I ask you, so, well, James, we deal with 4 distinct things. It's this, 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 and this. It gives you confidence because you've got structure in the conversation. And it also has this added bonus, and I always sort of smile to myself when I say this, but it kind of sounds like you know what you're talking about, doesn't it? So define the problems that you solve and have them there so you can be very clear and say, look, we solve these 3 problems and these kind of people have them, and these are the trigger points I have, blah, blah, blah. Get all these very basic things laid out, because that will help you when you're communicating with people. So in this example, I said, look, we deal with these particular things. And actually, David, I think number 2 is the one that you're experiencing right now. Would that be correct? It is. Okay. Well, let me explain our process of work and how we deal with that. It's a 4-step process. We would do this, 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 and this. How does that sound to you? And notice how already, just from those 2 distinct pieces of structure, I feel more confident in the conversation. You feel like I know what I'm talking about, and we can move things forward. And the next steps effect. This is inspired by a piece of carpet, a carpet sample. So do you make it obvious to people what the next steps are to actually buy from you? So if I go to your website right now, is it really obvious how I contact you, how I buy from you, how I arrange a free trial or request something or whatever? And again, it might seem like we're stating the obvious because you know what these things are internally, but there's this notion of Wysiwyg, which isn't in these slides. Wysiwyg, what you see is what you get, which is computer terminology. If you don't tell me certain things, which might be very obvious to you, but if you don't tell me certain things, you can just presume that I don't know them. So you need to child-proof and idiot-proof your messaging sometimes to say, look, if you'd like to go ahead, you need to call us on this number, you need to email this number, you need to fill out an application form or apply here and do whatever. What are the next steps in your business for me to actually buy from you? And how could you bring those out and make them as clear and as simple as possible? Okay, much shorter section there for you, David, but a couple of just mechanical things that help you to structure the conversation. Trigger points, one of the most crucial, I would say, knowing exactly what triggers people to need you. Oh, you're on mute, David.
Oh, sorry. The area I was thinking about when you were talking from a process perspective, James, was this area of building relationships or the sales touches. And I think a lot of business owners find that relatively easy when they're small, but when they get bigger, they're dealing with bigger customers or bigger clients. And sometimes it's hard to find those people to talk to in the bigger organizations to build that know, like, and trust.
Mm-hmm.
Have you got any sort of mechanisms that you can use to help people build that know, like, and trust before they get into what I call the close meeting? Because without that relationship, sometimes that close is very difficult.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that I use, I mean, it's relevant for most businesses, but admittedly not all businesses. So I use social media as what I would call my drumbeat. So LinkedIn is for me in particular, is essentially my stomping ground. That's where a lot of my potential clients are going to be. And I have a regular amount of content that goes out every single day on LinkedIn. And I use it as a drumbeat and as a follow-up mechanism. So if I was speaking with you today about something, or I just connected with you today, I know that you're going to see a certain amount of my content over the next few days. And in the background, there's something known as propinquity. So the more we're exposed to something, the better we feel about it. So you'll have seen adverts for products you'll never buy, like ladies' makeup and all this kind of stuff, but you'll have relationships with those brands and understandings of those brands and estimations of them. So by being visible to your potential clients, and in our very isolated world on Zoom these days, social media is one of the best ways to do that. But do you have a regular kind of background drumbeat of social media posts and articles, and depending on your business, thought leadership things, etc., that are there? Because you mustn't forget the fact that we judge the world very harshly, and lots of people do their homework. So the people on this call might well have looked me up before this session. Who is this guy? Does he know what he's talking about? And you're going to go to my LinkedIn and look me up, and you're not going to verbalize these things, but you'll judge me very harshly. And people will do that to you. So if I get a call from David Hames, who's David Hames? I'll just Google him and check him out. And I need to be able to see some things that are going to support the argument. So having this drumbeat of social media posts or thought leadership things in the background is a great way to support your efforts when you're sort of cold calling or prospecting.
Fantastic. The other area I was thinking about is a lot of my clients tend to get into a bit of the trap of writing large proposals for their clients. Now, obviously, if you're in a formal tender process, you don't have a choice. You kind of have to do that. But yeah, in your view, what's the pros and cons of written proposals?
They're very useful, but there's a mistake that lots of people make, and it comes down to this kind of confidence piece. I know what I charge. You're wondering what I charge, but we won't talk about that. I'll write you a proposal, David, and I'll send it to you tomorrow. And then tomorrow you'll get my proposal, which I spent ages and ages crafting. You'll ignore everything, scroll to the bottom right and look at the price. And you'll deem me expensive, because price, when separated from everything else, everything's expensive. So the only time price should come before value really is in the dictionary. And we make this issue for ourselves where we skirt around the issue. We don't even ballpark what we charge. We put lots of time into what we're doing. So funnily enough, coming up next, which is one of the tools that we're going to talk about, how to commercialize a conversation, is how we do that. But you need to really have an understanding just to make sure you're not going to waste your time. So, okay, David, what we're doing here, it's probably going to be in the, have you got a budget for it first and foremost? Yes, we do, blah, blah, great. Oh, you haven't got a budget? Okay, well, just to make you aware, so before I write a proposal for you, it's probably going to be in the region of about sort of £5,000 to £10,000, whatever it happens to be. How does that sound to you? Is that kind of what you're expecting? Because just for the want of that conversation, I'm there then to defend myself, because you might say, my goodness, that's extremely expensive. Why is that? But you might say, no, that's absolutely fine. That's what we're expecting. But if I don't mention anything to you, go away, write the proposal and send it through email, most of those things fail because that's the first time we've actually seen the price. And I think we're all guilty of getting proposals and just scrolling to the bottom right and looking what it is, not really looking at what we actually get. I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, I do that.
we all do it, but we all then spend hours and hours writing proposals to people because for some of us, we're just too terrified to talk about money. Great.
Let's talk about tools.
Let's do it. Okay, so the first tool I've got is this, which is kind of along the same kind of theme. It's almost like we rehearsed this. This is great. So it's how to commercialize the conversation. and I call it the value loop. Really, really simple stuff. You'll notice that none of the stuff I do is actually rocket science, but it's just about having a process and a structure to follow. So let's say we're having a chat now, David, about your needs and what you're doing. And I'm worried that the conversation's kind of meandering on here. We're friends. You're talking about going on holiday with me. We've become friends. It's getting a bit dangerous now. So I say, okay, hold on a second. David, can I just reiterate what you've said to me? I just want to make sure I've understood everything you've told me correctly. So you've told me blah, 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 blah. Is that right? Have I understood that correctly? I have. Awesome. Okay. So the first thing is that's how we punctuate the conversation. We say, can I just repeat some of this back to you just to make sure I've really understood this? For me and the research I've done, that's the most effective way to do that. The alternative is, you're probably wondering what I charge, David, let me tell you, or, we kind of have that overtly salesy approach to things. So can I just check that I've understood this correctly? I'll repeat everything back to you. So that's your starting point, point A. Okay, that's where you are. And from what you're saying to me, this is where you want to be. So this is the exciting, sexy, brilliant future that you're planning for yourself, and this is where you want to be. Have I understood that correctly as well? I have. Great. Okay. Well, to get from terrible current situation to beautiful end situation, you'll need a clear sales message. And what we'll do as part of that process is, and I'll list off all the different, I suggest we would do this and do that and teach this team and go into some details about what we would do. And that's where having that process of working, like we mentioned earlier, comes in really handy. So to get from point A to point B, we follow our 4-step process. We start with that, we do that, we do that, we do that. And to achieve all of that and to get you that end result, it's going to be in the region of around £5,000 to £10,000 or so. How does that sound to you? Is that kind of what you're expecting? What are your thoughts on that? And the reason I call this a loop is because obviously we can then go around again, but how does that sound to you is a nice unconfrontational way, so to speak, of getting their feedback, but giving them a ballpark figure eradicates this issue about sending proposals that are never going to be bought and they're never going to follow through. But we make sure we commercialize the conversation so we actually have this. So earlier when I spoke about information and opportunity, this is the opportunity. So I've given you all the information about my product or service. This is the opportunity. I'm actually asking you to buy, or at least I'm making it commercial. So this is where you are right now. This is where you want to be. This is what I suggest we do to get you from there to there using our process of working. It'll cost that approximately, but I'll need to write you a proper proposal. But before I do that, how does that sound to you? And sorry, I've forgotten your name, sorry, but to the lady that asked the question, this is how we commercialize a conversation. This is how we make sure we don't get friend zoned in it's a very unobtrusive way of doing it, because the alternative without this, if you're not looking at that, where do you begin? We're friend zoned. What do you say? Would you like to know how much we charge? Or I'll send you a brochure. It becomes edgy and it becomes a little bit confrontational. But this way is much slicker, much more conducive. And as I'll share this with you as part of the slide. So you, in the Zoom world we live in now, you can actually print this off, have this on your desk, so it can just remind you to guide you through that process. And the second of the 2 tools that I'm going to share today is this: how to tell if an objection is actually real. Now, unfortunately, graphics are my strong point, so I do apologize. I'm having them all redone at the moment, but I'll just talk you through this process. So at the top there, we get an objection from somebody. Now, objections are often symptomatic. They're not causal. They're usually quite high level, quite superficial. And you're too expensive or you're expensive, quite a common objection for some of us to get. So the key question to ask here is, what makes you say that? Now, what makes you say that works for objections, but it works for pretty much anything in the sales scenario. But it's a nice way of saying, just cut out the fluff. Give me the real answer here. Let's go from a symptom to cause. And most people can't really avoid answering that question, right? What makes you say that? So how do we tell if the objection is real? Well, the only way an objection is going to be real is if they actually engage with that and give you more information. So David said, wow, James, you're really, really expensive. Okay, David, well, what makes you say that? Well, because we've had a quote from somewhere else, or we thought it was going to be 50 pence, etc. If he gives me more information, he's engaging with me, that objection is pretty genuine. I can move forward. If he just repeats, oh, I don't know, just really expensive, I'm very unlikely to go further with that, or there might be actually something else going on. Some people actually quite flat out would just say, look, okay, I'm not interested, thanks very much. And they're quite sort of aggressive about that. And again, at least we know where we stand and we can move to don't chase them, replace them, because not everybody's going to buy from you, and that's okay. And obviously on email and other things, people will just ignore you and they'll disconnect. So the next time that you get an objection and you're handling it, just remember that question, what makes you say that? Because that helps us to dig a little deeper, find out what the real root cause is. And if they give you more information, then it's workable and you can move forward. If they just repeat it or they sort of go around the houses, then that's your cue to back off and say, okay, well, let's leave it there and I'll find more people. Because if you try and push against somebody who's just, I don't know, you're just really expensive, and the conversation goes around in circles, everybody's unhappy with that. So what makes you say that? The engagement piece is how you tell if the objection is real or not. We're done. Look at that. You got some questions for me, David?
I just going to explore one area on that loop, and then I'm going to open it up for
I'll go back to the loop.
So the area I wanted to explore a little bit is positioning the conversation, because often people don't have a closing statement or don't have a way to close out the conversation because they haven't positioned it as anything else but a conversation. So whereas if you manage to position the conversation, hey, so we're going to be talking about things and we're going to explore working together, I'm going to tell you how much it's going to cost, then people kind of expect that up front. So how do you teach people to really position that conversation up front? So actually closing at the end is quite natural because people know it's going to come.
I think for most reasons, I mean, most conversations are predicated either on you've got a relationship with somebody or it's a commercial relationship. So you can overtly say, okay, yep, this is what we're going to discuss today. You can do it in that way. Or this is my approach generally. So one of the ways that I articulate what selling actually is it's a conversation with money at the end. So this is how we make sure we actually get the money piece in at the end, because otherwise it's just a conversation. So I suppose in this example, if this person is not expecting this to be a commercial conversation, they're just complaining about how poor their messaging is, nobody understands what they do, and they haven't connected the dots between me and what I do, I could say, well, actually, David, I might be able to help you with this if that's something that you wanted to discuss. It would just be as simple as that, just a simple connecting statement like that. But I would wager that most of the conversations people are having are based on commerciality in the first place anyway. So that might be less relevant, but this is definitely how we just get that piece in at the end, because without this, it is just a conversation. And if you don't ask for the business or commercialize it, that can actually be a deterrent for some people. I worked with a client about 18 months ago. They lost business because they literally didn't ask for the business. And the people that they were pitching then gave me the feedback and said, well, because they didn't ask for the business, we presumed that they weren't very good at what they were doing and weren't very confident they could deliver. That's why they didn't ask for the business, and it deterred us. So there's all sorts of, so I don't have the haircut to be a hippie like your good self, David, but there's a lot of energy transfer that happens here. And there's a lot of things that we can feel that are going on in these conversations. And for me, the value loop is a nice way for you to stay confident, but not overbearing, but stay confident in control, because you've actually got to ask them for the business at some point. Otherwise, that could itself be a deterrent.
Fantastic. Right. What I'm going to do, James, I'm going to open this up for questions from the floor. So maybe if you stop sharing your screen so we can see everyone's faces.
There we go.
So I've got one on here from Hillary. So Hillary says, this loop, I'm assuming it doesn't necessarily happen within the first meeting. Maybe it's during the second or third meeting that this occurs. So I guess that's whereabouts in the relationship does this loop appear? So
that's where we had this notion of nothing is 100% prescriptive. You've got to use your judgment here. But if you're talking with somebody and they've given you enough information about the problem they've got and how to resolve it, it could happen in the first meeting, first phone call. Depends on your offering. It depends what's appropriate. The point I would make is it has to appear somewhere. So you need to make sure that you ask for the business, because if you don't, that's how we just end up in this kind of wishy-washy, nice relationship, but nothing really gets commercialized. So that's kind of a judgment piece, really, based on, have you got enough information to actually say, well, this is what we could do to help you. That's your cue, really, to use the value loop.
Fantastic. So is there anybody else that wants to share a sales challenge that James can solve for you, or I can solve for you, or Joe or Chris can solve for you? What sales challenges do you have right now? Let us know.
Okay.
So
Ask.
So this is a question from Janet, is how do you quantify your value when your clients involve you in conversations with their accountant and the accountant wants to know what value you are bringing?
Very good. So there's a couple of ways you can do that. I mean, quantifying and justifying the value in that sense with an accountant. So you'd have to look at, well, what happens if your service is absent? So what's the cost to the business? What's the cost if we use an alternative, a lesser alternative? And what's the cost if they do it themselves? So it's interesting that you've got direct access to the accountant in that scenario, but what they're looking for is ROI, the return on investment. So why is this the best use of money for that business? And most of the time it comes down to actually the deliverable result further down the road. So in my trainings, there's like specific ways you can justify the price, but generally it's going to be better than the alternative. And also we can use something called equivalence, where we take something understood, something not quite understood, and compare them together. So where is this business also spending money where they wouldn't dream of cutting it out because it would affect their performance? And could you compare yourself across to that? So could there be similarities in that where you could compare yourself across so you can reframe the spend on your offering so they understand the real value of it?
Thank you, that's great.
I also find that actually it's really helpful to monetize the value and then put it against the cost that you're charging. So most of it, I know most of your businesses, you provide great value to your customers. And if you can monetize that over many years and say, well, actually, you know, the benefit of what we're doing together is going to make you £100,000, and actually what you're paying me for that service is only £15,000. That's a great return on investment. So actually, I actually really welcome that. Do you want to involve the accountant bit? For sure, no worries. We can absolutely, with confidence, give you a great ROI on using us. So,
and that's a very good point, actually, in terms of the longer term, because by definition, most of us look at the shorter term. So in the next 1 month, 6 months, 3 months, a year, whatever, what's the ROI? But actually, depending on your business, but for most businesses, there will be a long tail value add. And just to remind them of that, as you're saying, David, so to reframe that to the longer term.
Yeah, we call it lifetime value. So if you can actually sketch out the lifetime value, then that works a lot. So for instance, with a coaching client, maybe one of my clients, let's say they're with me for 3 years. Well, that's their fees for 3 years. Plus, they're probably going to refer me to 2 other clients. So that's doubled or trebled that. So actually, the lifetime value of a product or service can multiply to be a really big number if you really calculate it well.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic, thank you.
Great. I've got a question here from Taylor. Is how do you know when to stop the chase? So many sales articles, guides always stress the importance of the follow-up to the point it seems excessive and annoying.
So there is no perfect answer. It always makes me smile when you get asked, what's the magic number? There is no magic number. So if somebody's not coming back to you, they're either not interested or it's not a priority for them right now. They're busy. So you've got to follow people up a little bit, you know, a couple of times, whether that's 2 or 3 times or whatever, but you've also got to look for those cues. So if you know, for example, you've sent something through LinkedIn or WhatsApp, or you've got read receipts on emails or whatever, if you know they've actually read the stuff, but they've not come back to you, you just need to take the hint. And this is where don't chase them, replace them comes in. So this need to endlessly chase people is based on this notion that eventually we'll grind them down and they'll buy from us because otherwise I'm going to lose. So not everybody's going to buy from you. That's okay. But use your own judgment. What feels right to you? If you feel weird sending that 7th email to that person and they've not replied to any of the other ones, then don't do it. If you don't like it as a buyer, don't do it as a seller. And it's very unlikely that somebody's going to miss that many communications from you and then actually buy from you. It might happen, but it's quite unlikely. And in any case, your efforts are much better invested in just opening up new conversations and taking the hint. Because if I sent you, and we're all on LinkedIn pretty much, right? And we've all had these people who connect with us, instant sales pitch. Did you get that? Did you get that? Did you get that? Did you get that? You've not responded to any of them. Are you going to buy from them? Probably not. So it's the same for your potential clients too, right? And that's okay. Take the hint, don't chase them, replace them. That's always my advice.
Great.
The other thing you can do, and just to jump in on that one, the other thing that you can do, you have a choice at that point. So rather than chasing, you can just kind of move away, like James says, or you can choose to build a relationship. And that could then be that it's a long-term gain. So potentially they could be a client, but just build the relationship with no sales. And in 6 months' time, they could then become, you know, a client after that stage.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question here from Hillary is, we're challenged at this time with many of our customers and potential customers suffering significantly after the pandemic, pubs and restaurants, etc. We're trying to reach a completely new set of end users, garages, for example. How do I prevent confusing my audience?
Okay, without getting too granular, I don't know how granular we want to get, but what's the nature of your offering, Hillary? But if you unmute yourself.
Hillary, unmute yourself and
Hi there, I'll put my video on, so. Hello. I'm part of UK Business Buddy. I think there's two of us here this morning because we recognise the importance of this particular webinar, but we help independent businesses and mainly those in the hospitality reduce the costs of their card transaction fees.
Okay.
Concise.
Yeah, that's fine. Sorry, I don't know what I was waiting for more. There we go. So you deal with the hospitality industry predominantly, or that's a big part of it, but obviously they've been affected by COVID, right? So one of the ways that you can get around that is to essentially have like a sub-brand that's not going to confuse that. So one of the things that I talk to a lot of my clients about doing, which is very cost effective and very simple to do and helps to get around this, is to use different domain names. So if you had a page on your website that you created that's dedicated to the new types of clients that you're after, and then you have a new domain name, which is £10 a year. So it's very cost effective. You don't have to move your website. You don't have to do anything else. You can just point that at that. That will get around this notion. So I'll give you an example. I use Calendly, for example, when I book calls with people. But my Calendly link is calendly.com, blah, blah, blah. I can't even remember what it is. So I use the domain name bookacallwithjames.com, and it points at my Calendly. So if you had you could have different pages for different offerings, and it could be car transactions for petrolstations.com or whatever, but something that's relevant to that specific marketplace. So they know that when you're talking to them, you're relevant to their offering and it doesn't muddy the waters. But you would need to have some degree of separation, just a new page or something on your website for that.
So those don't necessarily need to have their own public URL, but can just be used when we are pointing to those in social, for example.
Exactly. So it's used for conversation and for marketing, etc. So nearly everything I do is hosted at my website, which is clearsalesmessage.com. So I've got a book called Understand Your Buyer, for example. So in this context, I would say understandyourbuyer.com. It just points back at my regular website. So it just makes it easier in conversation for people to connect with what you're doing and understand it. And it's easy to read, write, speak, and spell. And it's explanatory or engaging. I've got a LinkedIn article about that as well, actually, David, which I'll link to you after this, because that's a really important point. And for the sake of £10, and it's not very technical to do, it can really help you to overcome that. I've also got, which I'll share with you as well, I'm going to give you lots of links, David, a YouTube video I created in March last year when the pandemic first happened, called 24 Ways to Adapt to Selling in a Crisis, because that might have some things that you can also benefit from and use to adapt how you're doing what you're doing.
Great. Question here from China. When you notice continuous false objections, are they playing coy or are they genuinely not interested?
They're genuinely not interested, I would presume. if you've kind of answered the question. If they're continually false, then yeah, and they're only giving you those things repeatedly because you'll repeatedly ask them, I would guess. So it's just to take that notion. There's also something that you can do, which I call the pushback. So you can say, okay, David, well, you know, you don't have to use me to do this, but make sure you use somebody to address this, because we've talked about this issue that you've got. And if you leave it, it's probably going to get worse. So you don't have to use me. You could use anybody to help you, but please make sure that you take some action here. And that's a nice way to separate yourself out of the conversation, because most people take the reverse effects. Well, if you don't use me, David, good luck. It's all going to go incredibly wrong. So step back and say, look, you don't have to use me. You could use anybody, but we recognize you've got a need there. So when you're ready, make sure you find somebody. Oh, and by the way, we do these 4 things to do it. So just make sure they do those, because that's really important. If they don't do this, 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 and this, then they might not be able to help you. And what we're doing there is surreptitiously positioning ourselves as the obvious choice, but in a very, very low pressured way. and we can walk away from the conversation accordingly. And if they don't come back, they don't come back, because not everybody's going to buy from you, and that is okay. It is not a zero-sum game.
Great. There's a question here from Josh Huggins. So if you lead with the relationship, what are some triggers we should be aware of that indicate we might be heading towards a friend zone? What are the danger signs of heading towards the friend zone?
I think you can kind of spot them, because it's when the things just lack commerciality. So we're no longer talking about the business or anything like that. We've literally just moved off topic. And it's okay to have relationships with people and to be friendly with people and have longer term things. But it's just to notice that from a commercial point of view, you should probably put your focus elsewhere, because lots of us can fool ourselves by looking at our pipeline thinking, wow, I'm talking to all these people, this is fantastic, when the reality might be that very few of them are actually potential clients. So internally, we've just got to judge that very harshly. Are they really going to buy at some point or not? And if you try the value loop or something else to commercialize it and it doesn't really work, then probably not. But you can still have a relationship with them, because to Joe's point, in the longer term, absolutely they might buy from you, and it could change. We don't just want to burn people who aren't going to buy from us here and now, but we do have to be careful with our resources and where we pay our attention, and not to kid ourselves that things might happen when if I just send that one more email, maybe they'll buy, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, the other thing I'd add to that, Josh, is that make sure you do the rapport stuff, or the fun bit or nice bit at the start of the meeting. Yeah, and so that's clear. So we're going to talk about the weather, the dog, the kids, stuff like that to start with, and then do your positioning statement and say, okay, this is what we're going to talk about, this is what we're trying to do, and this is what the end might look like, and then you're into business mode. And if you structure the conversation and tell people up front where it's going to be, then you're very much in business mode, and you don't tend to drift back to that rapport stuff. The rapport stuff is bad once you're into the sales conversation. You don't want to really be there.
Thank you.
The other thing, just quickly, I wanted to talk about, I think, is a question that a lot of this stuff, I don't know about you, but I see it and it's so obvious. I think, well, why don't I do this all the time? And then I go back to it, and then for a couple of weeks, I'm bloody good at it, and then I forget it again. So just in terms of keeping you sharp as a salesperson, I guess it's a good idea to talk about, well, how do we stay sharp? Because actually it's really good to do this type of session, or do a session with your sales teams every 4 or 5 months, just to sort of refresh all of these techniques, which really do work. And I don't know about you, but when you go back to it and you do refresh, your conversion rate for the next couple of weeks really does do well. Then you get a bit arrogant and you forget it again. So, in terms of refreshing, how often do you think, James, would be good to refresh sales techniques like this?
Well, like you say, once, twice a year or something. It doesn't need to be a really super duper regular thing. One of the things that I try to do, because I'm the first to acknowledge it's not rocket science, a lot of this stuff, but it's not common practice. One of the things that I try to do is use mechanisms and systems that are so simple that you can just recall them in the moment. So there's a reason Don't Chase Them, Replace Them rhymes. It's because I'm trying to make it more memorable and sticky. So in the moment, you remember what to actually do, and it almost becomes like a belief system or a value that you can follow, rather than thinking, well, what was in the value loop? And it's very complicated. So just by simplifying things down as much as possible, once or twice a year, I think is more than enough. But also in the world that we live in now with Zoom and everything else, having things printed out on your desk and having cues there and clues there for you, particularly in terms of, from a messaging point of view, think about the difficult questions you get asked. Why are you so expensive? What do I get for the money? Why should I choose you? Can't we just do this ourselves? There's a huge amount of value in thrashing those questions out and preempting them and having some canned answers ready, because that is the downfall of so many of the people that I talk to, because we pretty much leave our sales conversations to chance. So we're having a great conversation, we get on really well, that's great, Joe, wow, why are you so expensive? And then I can feel that you're not ready for that, and you're reaching for the answer, and you give me kind of a no offense, you give me a wishy-washy middle of the road answer, and we continue on the conversation, but then that's it. I'm like, oh, I'm not really sure. If you say, well, actually, people invest with us for 3 reasons, this, and this, and it's nice and controlled and nice and prepared, that's the difference. So whilst the techniques or the strategy and structures doesn't need too much practice, you definitely need that foundation of preparation. Or what are the most horrible questions you get asked in business? Thrash them out and prepare for them, because you know they're coming again, maybe even today. And if you're not ready for them, they can have a really detrimental impact on your conversations.
Yeah, I actually find scripts very useful, not necessarily to use during the conversation, but if actually you read your sales scripts before the conversation, so it's all in your head, and then you go into the conversation without the thing, you're much better prepared because you've actually practiced a lot of that stuff in your head. So actually scripts can be really useful to have on your desk, read before the sales conversation, so you're ready, prepared, and on point.
Any kind of prompt that you have. So with my messaging clients, when I work with them, we use acrostics. So acrostics are just memory systems. So if I said to you, well, why should we choose you? All you would have to remember is, well, we're the best of what we do. And BEST would be the 4 different arguments. Bah, 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 bah. So in the moment, you remember what you need to do. So you don't necessarily need a full-on script, or if it works for you, then that's great. Couple of bullet points, more than enough. Stick them on your monitor so you're ready, but make sure you do the preparation, because if you don't, when you get that phone call today and somebody says, wow, can't we just do this ourselves, you'll remember this conversation.
The other thing, just to jump in there, the thing that really helps is when you listen to the conversations that you're having, because it's really clear when we listen to calls where you can pivot, and you can either go to a get to know you call and then it's just a conversation, and there is kind of a finite point in that conversation where you could move it the other way and close the call, and lots of people miss that point. So it's good to have conversation, but there is also you also have to have control of that conversation and steer that conversation towards a close rather than carrying on an engaging conversation, which is then a nice chatting. So just being aware of where you push the sell and where you push the get to know you.
Yeah, recording your calls can be really powerful. When you listen to them back, the first thing you're saying is that doesn't sound like me. That's the first thing. But once you get over that, actually reviewing how you're doing, you often spot things, well, I could do that better next time. So in terms of getting better at sales, recording and listening to your sales conversations is a really powerful way to get better. Hey, there's a couple of other questions that I want to take, if I can, in the few minutes we have left. So there's one here from Joe. In your experience, are some people more welcoming to the sales pitches than others? I don't respond to sales calls or emails at all. Are there people who typically do?
Yeah, absolutely. Some people are warm to it, some not. And again, that comes to that judgment call of knowing when to proceed and knowing when to not proceed, but just not feeling like you have to proceed with everybody because we're working to this zero-sum game. So if you meet somebody and they're immediately frosty with you on a phone call or an email or whatever, then it's a judgment call. But I would say it's okay to step away from that if you don't think that it's worth pursuing. Don't chase them, replace them, just move into another scenario. There's this kind of misunderstanding that every single person is sellable and we just have to persist until eventually we get them to buy from us. And I just don't subscribe to that. But yeah, some people can be extremely frosty and other people are extremely welcoming.
Hey, great. There is a few more questions, but one thing we try and do in all of these sessions is finish on time because it's Friday. So I'm going to wrap it up now. But firstly, I'd like to say a massive thank you to you, James, for joining us today. I've written tons of notes. I'm sure everyone else has written tons of notes as well. And thank you for offering to give all of your slides and videos and stuff to the team. I'm sure they're going to be super grateful. So for everybody, the next webinar in the Mastery series will be on the 12th of February. And Chris, that's going to be led by you. Do you want to give it a quick preview in terms of team mastery?
Yeah, absolutely. Really looking forward to that session. We'll be talking about leadership, the team, and our coaching ethos. And we'll have actually a colleague from the Royal Air Force join us, a gentleman called Nick Mounsey, who heads up or used to head up the E3D, so looking at that reconnaissance picture in the air. So how he has mastered that team mastery, communicating between multiple units on the ground and at sea and at air. And I think that's really similar to what we're doing, you know, in that virtual environment at the moment. So how do we control the environment and lead in that space to enable the right teams to come together, whether that's stakeholders or those internal teams as well. So we're really excited to welcome Nick and access some of those tools and tactics that help the best operators in the world do what they do fantastically.
And Graham's just reminded me, I said the 12th of February when I meant the 12th of March. So that's the 12th of March, guys. Fantastic. Hey, well, I hope you've all enjoyed it this morning. Have an amazing weekend, and I'll see you all on the 12th of March.
Thank you. Cheers, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers,
Cheers,
James.
guys.
Bye,
Thanks,
guys.
guys. Take care.
Thank you.